Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from DeltiasGaming.com. We're talking healer, baby. Yeah, you wanted it. Let's go over it. The battery Templar healer for Homestead patch. The biggest change that we're going to go for in Elemental Blockade as a healer. Now, why would you do this? Basically, you're going to run a lightning staff. And what this provides the group is that Blockade of Storm sets concussed enemies off balance. We go in here to the champion points. I don't know why I don't have all my champions points spent. But most DPS are running about 75 points in the Thaumaturge to take advantage of Exploiter. Increases your damage against off-balance enemies by 10%. So since that lightning staff change and you can run this, you don't necessarily have to run Infallible Aether, freeing up some gear slots to kind of go back to the old meta of Worm Cult and Spell Power Cure, or you can do a couple other different things. But Worm Cult and Spell Power Cure is still really powerful for this day and age. So that way you want to run Blockade due to the lightning staff passive change to get that bonus for off-balance concussed enemies. Next thing that specifically changed with Templar is Radiant Aura. This gives minor magic steal, which is extremely powerful in resource generation. Additionally, that it's a huge radius. So I only have it at rank 1 because I never really used it before, right? But now it can be like about 28 meters, lasts for 18 seconds on all the mobs you're hitting, but you'll need to attack them. The nice thing about this buff is it's just attacking or damaging the enemy. Why does that matter? Because if you're using a Templar or you're using dual wield, for instance, that attack doesn't have to be elemental anymore. So it can just be damage. Same thing that can happen with a tank. Even a light attack, heavy attack here and there can restore that 400 magic every second. So some of the previous buffs, like if we go to our weapon skill line, Destruction Staff, Elemental Drain. This used to give magic back, but it's been condensed into one specific ability, Minor Magic Steal. Those things do not stack. So when I say stack, you can't do Radiant Aura and then do Elemental Blockade to double up on the effectiveness. So really, it's just one or the other. Most groups are going to have a tank that applies the major breach, so spell reduction anyways. So there's really no point to run Elemental Drain if you're having a coordinated group, just because it's so powerful to use this for 18 seconds, AoE, a huge radius, incredible skill. Same thing with Siphon Spirit. Now this used to also give back magic, and you can see here it's been condensed to Minor Magic Steal as well. So essentially, you could previously stack up the effect with Elemental Drain, Siphon Spirit, and have tons of sustain. Well, now it's really just been condensed down to Radiant Aura is the most effective way to do this. So we changed that morph. Another reason we went with Radiant Aura instead of Repentance is because most DPS builds these days are magic. Just because the effectiveness of the range, the Destruction Staff ultimate, the gear sets, the optimized magic. So in trials, so forth, if you want to be hardcore, you know, Radiant Aura is the way to go. If you're wanting to do PvP or you have a bunch of stand-based friends, it's still useful to pick up Repentance. But typically in a trial, you'll have one person with maybe Repentance, one person with Radiant Aura. When in doubt, Radiant Aura is probably the best way to go for sustained in trials. Repentance is pretty good for picking up corpses and easy, efficient heals. But Radiant Aura, if you're going to do trials, pick it. We get to the option here and another sustained tool that does stack, and that's Orb. So on Daunted skill line, get it to stage 5, which is pretty easy to do. There's two good options with this skill. Now, Mystic Orbs is more kind of like the dungeon sort of thing because it gives back magic over time as well. The other orb, Healing Orb, heals like a truck, and it can actually outperform, out-heal Healing Springs if it's going through people the way you're throwing it, if people are popping those synergies. So if you're going to do hardcore trials, probably take Energy Orbs. If you're going to be doing dungeons and want a little damage, want a little bit extra magic return, take Mystic Orbs. The thing about Mystic Orbs that you need to understand, right, it's a bowling ball. Right, it goes through. So if we read the skill as I walk, we read the skill, allies can activate the synergy, great. Project this ball that floats forward, dealing damage to enemies, okay? So that's important. Once you explode it, that 8-meter radius is where it restores the magic. So instantly and over time. To nearby allies per enemy hit. Super important. So when you're doing bowling balls, you need to factor in the actual angle of it. Sounds simple, sounds easy, right? So if I'm going to throw an orb, I want it to go through the mobs to restore more magic. So I'm going to angle it so that it goes, you know, through these. So don't just mindlessly throw them. Try to actually bowl through the enemies, so that way it hits more than one, deals damage, explodes, and then be near the explosion. So it doesn't do any good as a healer to throw these orbs 20 billion meters away and then not get the effect of the magic back. Because remember, where the orb explodes is where that magic return is going to be. So if most of your melee DPS are right here and the tank's facing right here, you throw this through a bunch of mobs, boom, they hit it, goes off, and it can stack. That magic return effect can stack. So if one person hits it, boom, another person hits it, that instant magic flood can happen a lot of times. So even as a stand build in a trial or a dungeon, you still want to hit this sucker. You still want to hit it if you're a tank. Healer, another healer throws an orb. Hit it. It's beneficial for not only for you but the entire group. It also can give it can give ultimate back with the synergizer passive as well, and it just gives a standard amount of resources back with Undaunted Command. So this skill is fundamental to use. Now, the only time I wouldn't pretty much use this if I was in a dungeon was just stand builds. Then I probably wouldn't even use it. It's somewhat useful for the tanks because they hit it. They get a lot of magic back as well. But for our dungeon diving series, I'm not going to use it. And so you can swap in something like maybe sweeps. So sweeps in dungeons, you run in with stand builds, you want to do a little damage, that's okay. But in trials, this is almost mandatory to have. We're going to have elemental blockade, destruction staff, lightning. It needs to be lightning staff to proc that concussed. Energy orbs, if you're going to want to do trials, you're doing dungeons, mystic orbs. Radiant aura, you're going to want for trials. The other morph repentance, if you're doing a lot of stamina heavy, doing PvP and you like that return. Extended ritual, this is for the negative harmful effects and minor mending really. This channel focus, super useful for sustained and getting your major resistances. If you want to have your spell crit on both bars, I would drop channel focus unless you're struggling with resource sustain, but you shouldn't be. But I really like channel focus here in this spot. Ultimate, we're going to use Solar Prison, so Nova. Grav Crush, great synergy. That's why I went with that morph. 240 ultimate cost. The thing about this is it's not going to increase your DPS of the entire group. It's going to do a little bit of damage, but the real reason you use it is for the damage reduction. So the damage reduction in Nova, you need to understand that it is applied to whoever the mob, the enemy, is inside of this. So if allies are inside of it, that doesn't matter. It applies to the enemies inside of this. So Veil of Blades is a big, little red circle. If you step inside of it, you get the reduction. Nova is not the case. It's the mobs that are inside of it. So this gives you somewhat of an advantage because if there's a boss here and your party's back here doing something, you can drop a Nova on it, and within this circle, whatever mob, enemy, not allies, their damage is reduced. The enemy's damage is reduced. So other effects, you need to be aware of it. You have to stand inside of it, like Veil of Blades for the Night Blades. Nova is not that way. So when you're dropping a Nova, number one, you want to place it on the highest threat mob, typically a boss. But you need to make sure that you try to encompass as many enemies within the Nova as possible to get the most effectiveness out of it. Second bar, I use a Master Resto Staff, and I use a Master just because, well, why not, right? And Healing Springs restores stamina with the Master Staff, plus it gives us a lot of max magicka, which is also very useful. So Healing Springs, now this isn't something I use in dungeons. It's really effective for a lot of targets. AoE healing. Now, I don't have everything in Blessed, but when you stack it up, it can stack the healing effectiveness. You see ×3. So if you're clicking it and block canceling, you can get it up to 4. So it is kind of like a heal over time. And that's why it's so effective is, number one, the heals can stack, but just a massive radius. So trials, it's mandatory that you have this. But you're also going to need to have a burst heal, making Breath of Life really, really good. Constantly I get questions, hey, can this class heal? Can this class heal? Yes, it absolutely can. Everyone can use Healing Springs, right? But not everyone can have Breath of Life. Breath of Life is that burst heal that tops you off. If you're playing another class and you want to heal effectively, you have to have some way to get low health people, and you can use Healing Ward as a substitute, but Breath of Life is the way to go. But it's high magic cost. So you're not going to want to spam this sucker. Even in trials, you need to have this. The reason why is not everyone is going to be able to be in your healing springs. There's going to be mechanics where you have to move out of it. Someone's going to have to res somebody or something. And the nice thing about Breath of Life is it's smart healing, right? So it's going to find who's the lowest health. And as long as you're in that huge area and you're not line of sighting the person, it's going to heal them. So AoE, simple heals, boom, smart, easy, one-click button heal. But remember, the purpose of a good healer is to buff and do heal over time. Your goal as a healer is obviously to heal, but like other games, you don't have to just sit there and mindlessly heal. The thing you're going to want to do is optimize your DPS with buffs and giving them resources and also heal. So that's kind of how we have our bars set up. So healing springs is the big area heal. Breath of Life is just the burst heal. So optimizing your group. Combat Prayer. Now, Dungeon Diving series, I don't run this because Gil's on a Nightblade. And Minor Berserk. It is incredible. Some classes, Nightblades, have access to this individually and don't need this buff, but it's still useful for the Minor Resolve and Ward, or if it falls off. The trick to being a good healer is maintaining this buff. It does heal really, really effectively, but you can see it's not in a circle, like Healing Springs. It's right in front of you. So positioning it is key so you can get the DPS dust on everyone, like in a trial. Or in a dungeon, it's really useful unless you're running with just Nightblades. 8% is 8%, and that's going to really skyrocket your group. But remember, the buff only lasts 8 seconds. So it's going to have to be, you're going to have to be bar swapping a lot and really prioritizing this buff with blockade. So 8% more damage, 8% more damage. So those two skills right there, you're looking at upwards to 16% more damage for your group. And they're both on 8 seconds. So you're pretty much going to have to do this and this, and then kind of manage from there. Because remember, the more damage your group can output, the more mechanics you can skip, and the easier combat and everything becomes in the game. So Combat Prayer, consider this one of the most important buffs you can run. Now, if I'm playing with just Nightblades or I'm doing a dungeon, I like to use Rapid Regeneration as a heal over time. It only goes to a couple players, so in trials, this isn't going to be useful, right? Because otherwise you have to sit there and click 6 times every 16 seconds, and if that was the case, that's all you'd be doing. So sometimes this isn't exactly the useful in trials unless you're in a high movement speed. But in dungeons, it's great. 2 clicks, you got a lot of healing over time, and you can do more damage. So that's what I slot in here, Combat Prayer, or here if I'm doing a dungeon. So Nightblades, just Nightblades, I take out a Combat Prayer, I put Beam in. I'm doing a dungeon, take Healing Springs off, put Rapid Regeneration in. Spears, now Luminous, I go with this just for PvP because it does drop block. It does add a little bit of magic, but if you're going to do dungeons, take Blazing. You're going to want the extra damage. And even trials, you might want the extra damage. You can spam cast it, does great AoE and single target. So the morph that I chose is this, just simply for PvP. So it's up to you. When in doubt, a little bit more damage with Blazing is probably better than the tiny amount of magic this restores. And we talked about Breath of Life already, and the other one is Aggressive Warhorn, increasing you and your group's damage. It's all about optimizing your group's damage. Every role has a way to do this, every class, and let's say a trial or a dungeon. So good coordinated teams look at it as raid DPS, not individual performance. So I don't care if my healer does 5,000 damage. If the buffs that they're providing increases everyone's damage by 5,000 times, 11 players, that's way more beneficial than them doing 10,000 DPS. So if you have that mentality, your tank have that mentality, you're going to be running these buffs, Aggressive Warhorn. You're going to try to maintain this every 10 seconds, or 9.5 to be exact, though it's going to be hard to do that sometimes. When in doubt, if your tank and healer both use this and keep that 10% max stat pool up, that is a good place to start. Once you become more optimized, you become more familiar with your group, then you can go, hey, 10 seconds, I got a Warhorn, click it. Okay, hey, tank, do you have one? Yep, okay, click it. Hey, I got the next one. And that's how you kind of talk through a raid once you kind of become familiar with your buffs and who can generate ultimate the fastest. Usually it's the DK tank. So aggressive Warhorn when you need damage, when you need mitigation during specific mechanics, or you're just worried about, can my group survive this? Drop this on the individual boss or bosses or mobs that you need to use. So Deltia, what is my rotation? Well, there is no rotation in terms of what you're doing as a healer. So let's talk about priorities. The priorities really are, you need this, the minor magic still, right? You need that for sustaining a group. You're going to need orbs once the fight gets started, and you're going to want to throw the orb so it goes through the most enemies you want. But in terms of a priority, what I consider the priority nowadays would be blockade on as many mobs as I can, combat prayer on as many friendlies as I can, and then I go from there. So typically what I like to do is after I do a combat prayer, you know, if I need massive healing, I'll do a couple of healing springs. If I don't and it's a dungeon or something, what I like to do is a combat prayer and I throw a spear. I try my best to throw a spear on our primary target where the tank is. So you see the spear doesn't go away, you know, instantly, right? It hangs around for about 6 seconds. So that gives a chance for the tank to grab it, or a DPS to grab it, or whoever to grab it. So they're topped off. If they can't block, they're dead, we die, right? So it's a #1 priority. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to throw that, bar swap. Now, when I get to here, let's say this has already been applied. What do? Next, I want to optimize the group's magic. So I'm going to hit Radiant Aura. That's going to be 18 seconds a duration. So I go back to doing my ritual, and I'm going to try to maintain my ritual so the tank can hit the synergy. That's very important if they're running my T3 build or Wooler's build and they're running Alkosh, right? And then I'm going to put my ritual down for self-sustain. And I can't go out of it, but I just want to go back in. So once those things have been applied, you're doing this, you're constantly watching, is my group taking damage? Ultimately, you want to provide these buffs. But if someone takes damage, they're about to die, you need to bar swap and you need to heal. If you're a new healer, double bar Breath of Life and put it in the exact same button. So if I'm starting out and I'm getting used to this build, what I would do is I would, let's say, drop Channel Focus or Extended Ritual. And I would put blockade there, and I have Breath of Life. So if you can't get to bar swapping as fast and you're struggling to heal, double bar it. It's better to have it in an oh crap button where I see Johnny's down to 20% health, breath. Simple, it's easy, gets used to it. As you become more proficient and get better at healing, and you recognize when someone's going to be in trouble and you're better at bar swapping, then put another ability on your bar. Maybe even Inner Light to get that crit on both of them and they get that max magic. So once that's done, you're basically at that window where you need to bar swap again and do combat prayer. So it would typically look like something like this. So blockade, combat prayer, throw a spear, radiant, my ritual, and guess what? I have to bar swap, then I have to bar swap, and I'm going back. Now what do I need to do? Okay, maybe I'll do a couple of heals. I'll throw a spear here. Guess what? Combat prayer, blockade. Well, now I have to apply my rituals again. Okay, now it's a good time to throw a couple of orbs, go back, and combat prayer. And guess what? You need to blockade. So the blockade combat prayer is basically your bread and butter, going from that bar to that bar, doing those two things. Typically when you're on that bar, it's an opportunity to do another buff. So if I do a blockade here, and now it's time to do a Radiant Aura. Okay, bar swap, do a combat prayer. That's a good time to throw a healing springs down and a spear. Go back. Well, I got about a second or two before I can do something. Okay, I'm going to throw a couple orbs. Then I do this. Then I'm going to apply my channel focus. Then I go back. Okay, well, I got a second or two. I can do a healing springs. See, this is what you're doing. So there's not necessarily a strict, you have to do this right now set of things, but you want to prioritize combat prayer for max damage and then also blockade for that buff, and then go from there in terms of what you do. So I took a long time to explain this, but I want you to understand that's what good healing is about, is prioritizing buffs over healing once you get familiar with it. Sometimes you can't control what the DPS is doing or the tank or whatever, and they're going to stand and poop. At that point, heal them. You have to keep them alive. But when you get more familiar, your team gets better, you're taking less damage, work on buffs, damage, resources, healing. So we're going back gear-wise. Spell Power Cure, the fundamental thing you're going to want to run, that's in White Gold Tower. That's going to be your #1 priority to get a hold of this right away. Now, not everyone's going to have access to that, or you're starting out as a healer. What would I run, or what did I run? I ran good old Kaggernax, or Kaggernackers, or whatever you want to call it. Kaggernax Hope. So it's a real simple set. It gives you good resources, max health, which you'll need if you're lower CP, and it decreases the res time. So it can be very useful for newer players to run something like this. But your goal is to run White Gold Tower so you can get a 5-piece of Spell Power Cure. That's #1. #2 is running something like Worm Cult. So this would give you and your group reduction in magic cost, which is also extremely helpful. Working my way up to this, Worm Cult, working my way up to Worm Cult, or if you want more powerful heals, you can run the Sanctuary set. Increases your healing received by 12%. That stacks with minor vitality, minor, major mending as well. So it makes your team really, really tanky. Or you can run a 2-piece set like Troll King or something as well with Spell Power Cure. So there's a lot of options that you want to run. Just a basic standard setup of 5 Spell Power Cure. Go with that first. Then go from there. So Worm Cult, make sure one person has this in your group, especially if you're doing a trial. Someone already has that. You want really powerful heals. You want to be really tanky. Go with Sanctuary. Okay, someone has that. Maybe I'll run Troll King as well. So it just depends. When in doubt, work with what you have. So if you have a 5-piece Kaggernax Hope, that you can craft, make it. Start working towards Sanctuary or Spell Power Cure. Because remember, Spell Power Cure comes in jewelry now as well. So ideally you would have 5 light, 1 heavy, 1 medium, but some combos like Spell Power Cure and Worm it's not possible, right? They're all light. So in that case, I would probably go infused on my head, chest, legs, and like you can see, I don't have all those things exactly the way I want it. And then divines on the rest. And you can run a bunch of different Mundus stones. So I have overkill and max magic recovery. It shouldn't be that high because you don't really need it that high. So I have the Atronach. You can run a lot of different ones. Thief would probably be the best bang for your buck in terms of healing efficiency and always getting those crits. Because we are going to spend a lot of points and champion points into Elfborn, increasing damage and healing dealt by spell criticals. Even though Major and Minor Force did get nerfed a little bit, it's still really, really good to have high critical and impactful crits. So I would go with the Thief Mundus Stone. Atronach for people that are lower in CP, and I had this for PvP as well. The Ritual that gives you a flat healing can be really nice if you want to stack with Sanctuary and just do massive, massive healing. But when in doubt, magic builds, I would stick to the Thief. Stand builds, I'd stick to the Shadow. You're probably not going to want to be a vampire on this build. Now I do it for PvP because it's really beneficial. Other than that, though, I wouldn't do it if I were you, because the extra fire damage, you're just going to have too many encounters where it's really, really hard to sustain through that. Okay, let's talk about the champion points real quick. And so 100 and 100 split makes sense, right? Magician, reduced cost, and 2 Arcane is 25. Moving over to here. This really depends on what you do. So Elemental Expert, if I'm doing dungeons, I just want to crank through it, I'll put 100 points in here. Just really simple. If I'm doing trials and I need healing, big boy healing, I'm going to go like this. So 100, 98, and 2. When in doubt, stick with that, if that's what you're going to do. So you need that Arcane well. That's pretty much really where you want to go. But if you're doing dungeons and you want a little bit more damage, you can pump Elemental Expert, going into the Thaumaturge and so forth. But this would be the standard setup for trials or like big healing. Moving over here, you can do an 89, 90 split, whatever you want, 11 to thick skin, but really your damage mitigation comes from this more so than armor. So I've seen people pump this up and it just doesn't make sense to me because armor doesn't help you nearly as much as hardying Elemental Defender. So when in doubt, I'd stick tons of points into here, a little bit into here, and even a few into quick recovery can be useful. Last thing I want to touch on is race. And Argonian is my favorite, and what I think the best healer race. Reason why: increased healing done and healing received. That seems to be more impactful than max magic to me. Also, when you're looking at resourcefulness, this drink, Potion Restore, is better sustained than, say, a high elf recovery. Don't believe me? Go test it on the PTS. I'm telling you, Argonians are powerful. Downside is you don't have as much max magic, right? So if you want to play a high elf because you want to do healing, and when you want to do DPS or a Breton or a Dumber, great. But I'm telling you, for pure healing, both PvE and PvP, what I've seen, what I've tested, I like the Argonian. Leveling as a healer, people keep asking me. Now, you can play the game however you want. If you want to level as a healer and cast healing springs, great. But you're not going to kill anything doing that. The easiest way to level in this game is basically starting fresh. You're going to use one skill the entire game. The entire leveling process, and that's puncturing sweeps. Heals you, does damage based off max magic. It's so simple. It's so easy. Use this. Single target, AoE, and then you can start building your bar around this, right? So we're going to need to level all 3 skill lines at the same time. So we're going to put this on. And then as we level that up, okay, I'll switch it and put and so forth. So I just get all these skill lines leveled up. I can put Nova down, okay? Now you get your best heal right away as well. Okay, Breath of Life. So keep these 3 skills right here. Breath, sweeps, and then whatever you want from the Dawn's Wrath. You can switch that one out. You're doing this, so when you reach endgame, your entire skill lines will be all 50 instead of Adric Spears at 24, Restoring Lights at 50. And I've seen people and trained people that have that. It sucks. Level them all up. Now, people constantly ask me this. I would use a Destruction Staff. We know we're going to use Elemental Blockade in endgame, right? Okay, well, let's put that on. Get that leveled up. Now, I would equip a Destruction Staff, but I would still level up Healing Springs and all my Restoration Staff abilities. The entire game, I wouldn't even need to bar swap. I could literally run this exact same bar setup and slot, basically substitute a couple abilities here and there to level them up, and I could level up my Destruction Staff, my Resto Staff, all my class skill lines, and then level up one class skill line really fast. Like, let's say you want to level this up to get all the passives. Bang, that's it. Very, very easy, very, very basic. Training gear, craft something that has damage, like even Cagernax, and sweeps your way through it. If you're doing dungeons and stuff as a little Templar healer, Breath of Life's all you need. Put a Resto Staff on, and then maybe run Rapid Regeneration or Combat Prayer here and there, and then have that on your back bar. And that can get you through everything. Very, very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Well, gang, that is it for our healer build. This is just a general outline. Part 2, I'll do dungeon diving, where I'll be narrating and showing you what I do, my thought process throughout healing, since it can be kind of complexing to new players. So just, if you don't get anything else out of this video, I want you to get this. Your number one priority is to keep people alive, but that's not always your fault if someone dies and just dies through a mechanic they're not paying attention to, dies from standing in red. There's something you can't out heal. Your goal is to, number 1, keep people alive. Number 2, optimize damage with buffs, combat player, blockade. Number 3, optimize people's resources. That's what good healers do. Heal, optimize damage, optimize resources. And if you get that and you work on it, you too can be an awesome healer in this game. I'm not perfect, got a lot to learn, but hey, that's why we keep coming back and having fun, isn't it? Thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe if you want more. I told you I'd be doing ESO content. Thanks for watching.